This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world-famous Comedy Cellar. We are available wherever you get your podcasts, available on demand on Sirius Satellite Radio, available on YouTube for that multimedia experience. This is Dan Natterman, Comedy Cellar, regular-ish, here with Noam Dorman, the owner of the Comedy Cellar.
I thought you're back, Dan. I heard Esty. She was all excited about your new set.
Well, she was. I haven't necessarily seen it manifested in the spots.
She's afraid the audience might not be there.
Okay.
No, she was very enthusiastic about you.
What Noam was referring to is Esty happened to watch my set a couple of weeks ago, and of course I was a little bit nervous, but in any case, but it went well, and a lot of stuff she hadn't seen, so she complimented me, and
Oh no, she was over the moon.
well, anyway, so I guess I got 2 spots on Sunday, which is unusual for during the week, so maybe that was as a result of that.
You have a very hard time taking a compliment.
No, I understand that she complimented me, but I'm just I don't know that it has manifested itself.
Well, you just said you got 2 more spots on a Sunday.
Yeah, so maybe it has. I usually don't put in for Sunday, but I put in for Sunday, and I got 2, which is usually on a weekday I only get 1. So maybe that might have been as a result.
It sounds like that's like a 50% increase.
Well, all right, yeah, maybe it is, or maybe Sunday they don't have a lot of people. I don't usually put in for Sunday. It's unusual, unless there's a holiday the next day. Anyway, that's Periel Ashenbrand. She's with us as well. Periel is a comedian, author, and our producer. And we don't have a guest today because there was a mix-up. David Coffin was supposed to be joining us. He's not here because he thought it was tomorrow, but it's today. So he's not here. So we're here, but we have stuff to talk about.
We have a lot to talk about.
I know Noam has some stuff to talk about in terms of his Twitter feuds. But before we do that, Noam, can I ask you a question about the new room, the so-called McDonald's room?
Yes.
Just by way of review, Noam bought the McDonald's around the corner from the Comedy Cellar. He's converting it into a comedy theater, if you will.
Yeah.
And my question is as follows. Will there be a hangout lounge type place there?
No.
There will not be. Okay. And the reason I bring that up is because, the hang is very important. A couple of weeks ago, they were filming a movie here at the Comedy Cellar. And so the Olive Tree Cafe, the restaurant above the showroom, was closed. And it really, really makes a difference in terms of the comics' enjoyment of the experience because we had no place to hang out. So I was hoping that perhaps there would be a hangout place. I guess there's
no room for it. It's a small room.
But also, why would you want to move the hangout? Like, then you're just diluting it. Like, you don't want half the people in one room and half the people in the other room.
That's true, too.
You mean the hangout here at the Olive Tree?
Yeah, you want the hang to be at the Olive Tree. If you put in a cool space someplace else, then nobody's going to come here. That doesn't make any sense.
Well,
That's a good point, Ariel.
I guess it depends. I mean, sometimes there's not a lot of room here. In any case, or our music night. Not everybody, enjoys the music night because you can't talk.
Well, that's a different thing. You're not going to open up a room around the corner, and then everybody's going to go around the corner.
Not everybody's going to go around the. Some people will go around the corner. You'll have a choice. But anyway, that's irrelevant because there will be no hangout room at the new. And just one more question: is it going to be tables, or is it going to be theater style?
Tables, just Comedy Cellar style.
Okay, even in the balcony.
Even in the balcony, yes.
Okay, and that's hopefully will be opening sometime in 2025. Anyway, that's enough Comedy Cellar business. Because I know Noam has much to discuss regarding his Twitter.
We don't have much to discuss, but through some sort of scheduling mishap, our guest, this is the second time this has happened to us in 8 weeks or so.
It is?
Yeah, Drew Pavlo also didn't.
That was 1,000% not my fault. I'm taking...
What percentage is this one your fault?
100%.
Really?
Yeah, because I should have...
You know that means everything.
Yeah, it's my fault. I didn't catch... He screwed up the day, and I didn't catch it. Why? It's okay.
Now, I'd love to see those emails.
I'm happy to show them to you. You know that I'm many things, but a liar is not one of them, right? I mean, you know that.
Yes, I do know that.
So I'm certainly.
It's only a lie if you
Believe
it's
it.
Never, yeah, it's never. Yeah, it's not a lie if you don't. It's not a lie if you believe it, Periel.
So let's go back to the February 25th when I sent.
No, we don't have to. We don't have to. I can see people switching their dials already. So what's your question, Dan?
Well, that was my question regarding the new room.
Right. What's your question now?
Well, now my question is, well, I was just going to
Let's talk about.
move it over to you because you've been having a Twitter war. You've been very active on Twitter, or X, I guess they call it, but I still think Twitter is a better.
First of all, can we talk about the Jeffrey Goldberg, Trump team Signal group chat?
Insane.
You'd have to review it for me because I'm not.
Oh, Dan. Okay.
You don't know what happened? Even I know what happened.
What happened, Periel?
The Trump administration sent out a group chat text message about their plan.
Can you let me just before we go there? Can you say text message, not text message? Is it possible? Can you actually just say text message? You know how many seconds you add to everything, like combine
Do you
all
wanna hear
all
what
the
happened?
all the extra trail of words adds up to That's why we run out of time with guests sometimes. Somebody just say.
Oh,
repeat
I'm sure that's why we run out
Repeat
of
after
gas.
me. Text message.
Text message.
Okay, go ahead. Say it all again. Go ahead.
The Trump administration sent a text message to a group chat about their plans to go to war, and they
To war. Yeah.
CC'd the editor of The Atlantic.
Whose name is
I don't remember.
Jeffrey Goldberg. They didn't CC him. He was part of the group.
By accident.
We presume by accident.
Now, the thing that I find really ridiculous, except for everything, is that he went on this rampage about how irresponsible it was and what, like, a breach of security and maybe, treason or whatever, all this shit, which he's not wrong. But then he published it, which seems so egregious. Like, if you actually cared about the security of the country, why would you publish that?
No, he didn't do anything wrong. He first of all, he didn't publish everything as far as we know, and he to the extent he did, it was only after the issue was moot, after the attack had taken place.
Oh, I didn't know that. Is that true?
Yeah, of course it's true. Nobody's accusing him of divulging secrets.
Okay.
So there's this whole thing between Waltz and who's the national security advisor, and Hegseth and Vance and all these other people. I don't keep track of all the names of the administration like some people, it's like real journalists do. But I think everybody's missing the point about this. First of all, in no particular order. Yes, they're probably not supposed to communicate on a Signal app. But I have a feeling, and we'll know soon enough, that a Signal app, which is a encrypted text messaging service, I bet you this is pretty secure, as secure as any other encrypted technology. I know that law enforcement can't get in on it, and people in administrations, they talk on the phone. It's not like they don't communicate about things. And we also know that in a bipartisan way, they become too casual about this stuff. Look, Hillary Clinton had a friggin' server set up in a closet, didn't even keep the Linux kernel up to date in terms of security measures. And they actually had some technically classified material on that server. People argue about what level of classification, but anyway, it was irresponsible. So maybe they in this chat, they said some things that were secured, classified. Maybe they didn't. I don't know. Certainly they shouldn't have been doing that. And in a bipartisan way, it's clear that preventing federal cabinet members from becoming too casual about the demands and the importance of security, this is a problem, as it often is in many types of things where you just get complacent, right? So Trump, needs to put his foot down about that. So that's that. But that is not, I think, what Trump needs to be upset about, because I've had my best employees, give them enough time, do horrible, make horrible mistakes, catastrophic mistakes. I had one employee almost burn the place down. I've had, at a time when they were forbidden to be smoking in the premises. Actually, can I digress to a little story here? This is great. So I had an employee. I was on my honeymoon at the time. I had an employee. Let me start again. I was on my honeymoon at the time, and I got a call that there was a fire in the Fat Black Pussycat. Pretty serious fire. The sprinklers came on and all that. I was on my honeymoon. The place didn't burn down, but it definitely was close to burning down. For a sprinkler system in a business to go off, it has to be a very, very hot situation because these sprinklers, they ruin everything. So they don't just go off easily. Sprinklers went off, put the fire out. So the fire department came, and they traced it down. The fire department is amazing.
Oh, my God.
These forensics are amazing. They traced it down to a particular transformer on a computer that we had on the bar. The power supply overheated and started this fire. I said, wow. I said, I'd like to see that. So I asked Tony to get me the video of when the fire started. I wanted to see what happened.
Wait, could they tell you when it started?
Yeah, we know exactly when everything. So Tony gets the video, and what we see is the manager tosses a cigarette butt in the fire in the trash can. The trash can lights up on fire and almost burns down the whole thing.
Oh.
Meaning, so the funny part about this story is that the fire department didn't know what the hell they were talking about. And you know what? They use this kind of stuff in evidence to put people in jail, right? We sent our forensic team out there and we traced it down. This is how the fire started. It was this transformer. Well, it's all bullshit. It was just a cigarette butt in the trash can.
Wait, you literally saw somebody throw?
Yeah, we saw the whole thing. So it was.
But how do you know that it was? And you saw the fire.
Yes, we
from
saw the whole thing. It's not even like you saw him throw the butt. The fire starts. He throws the butt.
But didn't he see the fire start?
No, he threw the butt on his way out the door. Everybody's leaving. They throw the butt.
Oh
They
my
leave.
God.
The trash can goes. It had nothing to do with the computer.
Okay.
It's hilarious, right? So anyway, so
I'll
I'll
bet
just
you
say
didn't
that.
think it was hilarious at the time.
No, I didn't. But I didn't fire him. He was a good. I understood. Like this is a terrible mistake.
But who throws a cigarette butt in a garbage?
I know, Pearl. That's my point. Who talks about war plans on a Signal app? I'm just saying that people can make terrible mistakes, and that's not the story. I'm getting to the story now. The story is in that Signal conversation. JD Vance says, well, I don't know if the president's aware of these reasons why this is really not a good idea, but all right, if he's going to do it, I'll pray for it to work. This kind of stuff. Now this is absolutely unacceptable. If I have a general manager, I say, listen, we're going to have this policy. We're going to implement whatever it is. And she then goes to the staff after the decision has been made and says, listen, Noam wants you to do this. I don't know if Noam's aware of these 5 reasons why it's a bad idea, but that's what you got to do. This completely undermines the organization. What you're saying is that the guy in charge is not aware of why he shouldn't be doing this. It's either a completely naive guy who doesn't have the wisdom to be in that position. I was going to say experience, but I knew this kind of thing when I was 21 years old. I would have known better. Or it's treacherous. And then if you follow it a step further,
What he should have done is present it to Trump, saying, here are some reasons.
yeah, if he feels this way, when you meet with the president, Mr. President, I want to call your attention to these factors. And if the president says, yes, but on balance, I think it's the right thing to do, then you get behind it. And to the other 18 people, you say, this is what we're doing. This is the president. This is our decision. And, or you say, Mr. President, I can't abide by this. I think this is not national. I might have to resign. Okay, resign. That's what you do. But what you don't do, and then if you do agree to carry out the president's orders, even if you might privately think, then you implement them and you try to make them succeed. And you don't make something succeed by sowing doubt among the people whose job it is. But then take it a step further. Now let's say it screws up. Let's say actually Vance was right, that this was a bad idea for some reason, whatever his reasons were. Now He's in a position to say, I told you so. Now, you can't have your general manager saying, I told you. Like, this is so, in my opinion, I mean, could you just think about that?
No, it's insane.
Yeah. So, you know, it would be different if in a total meeting with the president there, everyone says, what do you think? And like when Biden told Obama in front of Gates and everybody else, I don't think we should go and get bin Laden. Excuse me. That was fine because that was a deliberation. But once the decision was made, everybody got on board. This was not a deliberation. This was actually, let me find exactly what he said, because there's one quote there which is even which is actually really bad, and I am missing it. Oh, this is where he says, I'm willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself. Meaning, like,
Well, he said this in the
yeah,
chat.
yeah. Keep these concerns to myself. You've already told 18 people. How do you keep it to yourself? It's so dishonest.
Are there
You're
18
not,
people in that?
Yeah, you're not keeping it to yourself. You're actually. This is why. Listen, the guy's not stupid. I think he's treacherous. I think this is the lowest of the low. He's claiming I'm going to keep it to myself, but by doing that, you understand, he's actually not keeping it to himself.
Of course not.
What does he mean? I keep it to myself. I'm not going to go public in the New York Times. Like, what do you mean by keep it to yourself? I'm not going to tell the president, but your whole job is to give the president the benefit of your wisest counsel. There's no way out here for this guy. Then Hegseth went on the news and lied through his teeth, and then they try to claim that Goldberg is a nefarious actor. This is all awful because they look so stupid. I mean, if they could get away with it in a Machiavellian way, you know, at least you could say they're competent, but they're incompetent in their attempts to be Machiavellian. But leaving that all aside, and I don't think this is really what's being spoken about most of all, from a point of view of the president, from Trump's point of view, and I think Trump understands very well what it means, what I'm saying. I do not see how Trump can ever have confidence in JD Vance again. This guy is a bad seed. And who told you so? Who told you so all along? I want to say I told you so. But, yeah, I mean, am I being too hard on him?
No, absolutely not. You're completely right.
What do you think, Dan? Oh, shit, I didn't mean to cut you off.
You know, he's publicly humiliating Trump.
Humiliating. Just short.
But the only thing is
not humiliating, just humiliating.
you impute nefarious motives, and that.
Well, I would have to say, you know, you find yourself in this position because it's a backhanded kind of excuse to say, well, no, it wasn't nefarious. He's just an idiot. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
I think it's a good possibility.
No, that's ridiculous.
It is a possibility sometimes, but I don't think it's what was going on there, because like my 11-year-old does stuff like this. Like that, he knows what he's doing. He'll implicate his brother in a way that sounds like he's defending him or things like this. You know, he's not stupid. He knows what he's doing.
Well, what would be the nefarious purpose of this?
Well, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. That's the next logical question. Some people just are toxic that way. And this is generally like when it happens within my organization, and it's not an uncommon thing to, you know, I understand this dynamic. Their intention is not to screw up the place. It's driven by some sort of ego defect, the ability to look better to your peers, to
throw somebody under the bus.
Yeah, in some it's something related to an insecurity or some way. It's some deep ego problem. It's a toxicity that some people, and we all know this, some people are toxic. And they prefer, and they create with them wherever they go toxicity. And I think Vance is toxic.
Well, what do you think? Has anybody else mentioned this particular?
I've been following that closely. I can't believe I'm the only person mentioned. I tweeted it. Yeah.
Can the president fire the vice president?
No video. Dan, you want?
Well, I don't know. You have to ask ChatGPT.
You don't know that? You know that.
Can-
Of course not. He's an elected official.
So
Impeachment is the only thing. He's not going to get impeached for
What
that.
do you mean, though? What do you mean he's an elected official? You pick the vice president. You can pick whoever you want. He doesn't have to get elected, right?
Well, he's on the ticket with the president.
Fine, but Trump, like, you don't have to go through any process. You can pick anybody you want.
Yes,
for
but in
vice
the end, he's elected. He's not a cabinet official. He wasn't. After Trump is elected, he doesn't then pick the vice president.
Right.
He's elected. The voters have sealed that, and that's that. That's okay. I like the podcast to be a remedial civics lesson.
Well, but a lot of people need that
I
remedial
know,
civics lessons. I mean, I didn't know offhand. I guess it makes sense, you know, but it would make sense the other way too. I mean, because the president did pick the vice president to be on
actually,
the ticket.
You did know. You're just not remembering that. Initially, the vice president and the president were elected.
Yeah, I know.
Separately.
Yes.
And then that led to that weird thing where the vice president was of the opposing party with Aaron Burr or whatever it was. So there was an amendment passed to to create the ticket system.
All right, let's move on.
Whoever had the second number
Okay,
number of electoral
Okay.
votes was
the
vice
vice
president.
president.
Yeah. You remember that, right, Dan?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
How come you're not asking me if I remember that?
Because you obviously, do you remember that?
No, I don't.
You were smoking pot. So that's that. Then what else? There's my
so-
Twitter.
The Twitter war.
Yeah.
You walked in here and you said
Well,
you're going to get
no,
shot.
Noam, if I could just brief background. Noam has a friendship with this cat named Darryl Cooper, aka Martyr Maid on X or Twitter, who is he presents himself as a historian. He's not credentialed. He doesn't have a PhD, but you don't have to.
You don't have to.
He's well read, and he has a history podcast called Martyr Maid, I guess is the name of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why he calls himself that, but it's a reference to some Greek thing.
No, I think it's a reference to religion and Jesus being a martyr. I don't know for sure.
Well, anyway,
I mean, it's a theme. It's a theme. I really don't know, but I know it's a theme in many conflicts, and I think he feels empathy for the martyrs. I think in some way.
Well, in any case,
Including Jesus.
he has a popular history podcast. He was on Tucker Carlson, and that made a lot of noise because he basically said that Churchill was the #1 villain of World War II.
Well, just to be fair, he did preface it by saying he might be kind of hyperbolic, but then he went on to make the argument that Churchill was at least a significant villain of the 20th century. That would not be hyperbole.
He also said that he said on Tucker that Hitler was installed by financiers and Zionists. He later disclaimed that and said there's no evidence for that. But that's
Did he
what
say there's
said.
no evidence for that?
Well, he tweeted something
saying
that he can't say with certainty
Yeah,
whether
that's not the same thing
case.
as no evidence. Yeah.
I'm not sure what he said, but he disclaimed it somewhat.
And he wouldn't debate with Andrew Roberts, who is I think the preeminent Churchill historian in the world.
And he was on Joe Rogan recently.
Yeah.
And I guess he reiterated some of those talking points about Churchill. I gather. I didn't see the interview, but
Look, I feel bad about this. I had So Daryl first came on my radar. I think I heard about him through Dave Smith, and I listened to some of his Fear and Loathing in New Jerusalem. Is that what it's called?
yeah, I think that's a history of Zionism.
Yeah, and I would actually recommend. I wouldn't recommend it as the only source on the conflict, but I would recommend that people who know about the conflict and are taking in various
Points of view.
perspectives on it. Yeah, that there is much in this very, very long. To be honest, I didn't listen to the whole thing, not because I was not interested. I often don't finish things. I would like to finish it, and it was to me kind of narrative, an anti-Israeli, anti-Zionist version of the conflict, but it was filled with richness in facts, richness in insight into psychological workings of people, like the way he described like the Muslim honor culture and how that had to exist without the organizations of judiciaries, and it was just a lot of very, very interesting stuff. He talked about just one thing that comes to mind, like how Prince Faisal, brought a slave to the Paris Peace Conference after World War I, just like bringing the past into the present as a talented storyteller, you know. And then I had some exchanges with him, and I found him to be a kindred. This is what I felt at the time: a kindred spirit in a way that he would answer direct questions. He didn't bullshit. He didn't take things personally. As in a certain way, he's still not. Even now that we're having our blow up, there's something about him that, you know, speaks to a person like me. There's some connection with him that this was much to the chagrin of many people that I know, influential people, very upset with me, and I defended him more than once on Twitter, even recently on the Rogan thing. I'm jumping around time when people were saying because he misstated or
he said Hitler was born in Germany.
Yeah. Hitler was born in Germany. Either he misstated or he was making a different point. And people were saying, you see, the historian doesn't even know that Hitler was born in Germany. I'm like, come on, that's ridiculous. Of course he knows Hitler was born in Austria. Everybody knows Hitler was born in Austria. Nobody knows that much about World War II and doesn't know this. Like, why you? So, you know, and he's defended me at times. I was the reason. He had that famous tweet about where he had the Nazis juxtaposed to the Last Supper at the Paris Olympics, the trans version of the Last Supper. Do you remember that?
Yes, and he said, well, the outcome,
I prefer this to that.
He preferred the Nazis.
Yeah, and I wrote him, and he took it down because of that. And when somebody asked him why did he take it down, I believe this is all about saying, he says, well, you know, Noam was right as he usually is. So, you know, as I'm recounting these things, it's painful for me because I think I've scuttled that relationship that I was happy to have that relationship. I like to have people that I disagree with, especially if I'm going to, and I like to be constantly sparring with the smartest of those people because this is a good knife sharpening process, right? And I liked him. I just a little bit before this whole thing blew up, and it's my fault it blew up. But blew up, I emailed him and said, when are you coming to town? I really want to sit down and have a beer, and I want to talk to you about shit. There's so much going on, and I prefer, you know, in a certain way, to not be talking on the podcast. I'm not, as you guys know, it upsets you. I'm not looking for clicks and all that stuff. I many times prefer just to sit in the olive tree with somebody, but I can't always do that. But you can invite them to the podcast, right? So, but anyway, so to go back to when the Tucker thing first happened, I just thought he was this guy on the Arab-Israeli conflict, and I didn't know there was this fascination about the Nazis and all that stuff. I didn't know that his logo was painted by a vicious, you know, like one of the most. I posted this on Twitter today. Like one of the most. Actually, Tiana, do you have that video I sent to you today? Yes, I do. You can play that. Just give you. I was going to talk about something else, but I happen to have it. So, like, this is the guy who did Daryl's painting, the Martyr Made logo painting. Go ahead, play that, Tiana.
This is Anton LaVey, the founder of the Satanic Temple formerly known as Howard Stanton LaVey, unapologetic Jewish Zionist who revered the protocols of the Elders of Zion, who vigorously worked with Zionist extremist organizations.
Can you pause it for a second?
To smuggle weaponry into Israel whilst committing.
If you're listening and not watching this, as he's talking, there's all kinds of images of Jewish things, Jewish logos, Jewish people, Jew. Go ahead, continue, Tiana.
Mass genocide onto innocent lives in Palestine. So much bloodshed, so much innocence raped and pillaged, all in the name of religious superiority over the Gentiles. Understand this man writing the Satanic Bible and having the cosign of this very demonic tome by Asaph Dayan, the son of Israel's defense prime minister Moshe Dayan, is not just a coincidence, because there are two types of Satanism represented in the culture. First, we have the atheists LARPing and playing Dungeons and Dragons. This demographic is controlled opposition used to make crusaders like you and I laughably step back and jest. But there's a deeper, more unknown satanic spirituality that normalizes antinatalism, duplicitous sexual abnormalities, communism for the uninitiated, pedophilia, and the sacrificing of God's non-chosen cattle. And those practitioners worship at the altar of the synagogue of Satan. They lift their hands gallivanting towards the Sar Remphan, with such sheer arrogance and entitlement just to mock good Christian families further into humiliation in their own country. Look, it's always good versus evil, heaven and hell, Christ and Lucifer, and Christianity against Satanism. And the true satanic temple, my friends, is not about red horns and a pitchfork. That's what they want you to believe. True Satanism is ideologically subverting the populace with perversion to sacrificially fund sin, evil, whilst at the same time, by the way, undermining the very identity of those said people. Because Talmudic Judaism is a stepping stone towards Satanism.
So this guy, first of all, this is Arthur Quan Lee. He's an artist. He's very good, right? He's a very good prize.
He's a good-looking dude.
He's like a Bond villain. But anyway, so this guy,
he's an AI
what a coincidence.
creation.
So this guy did Martyr Maid's logo. So when I first asked Daryl about this, he says, yeah, he did. But, I didn't know his politics at the time. I don't know how he got into that Nazis. Like he really he's like I met him a couple times, like just in a kind of a matter-of-fact way, but I didn't like.
So he's a real guy. He met him because Tiana was saying he looks like he's an AI generated.
No. It's an absolute real guy. You can look him up. He's a good artist. So
he's quite good looking, don't you think?
yeah. He's very aerodynamic looking. Anyway. But then I'm jumping around in time again. Just like so, that's what Daryl said. But just like last week, he tweeted something about his guy. He says blah 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 by the great. And he uses the term, the great Arthur Quan Lee. So I'm like, all right, Daryl,
I always feel a bit betrayed when I see an Asian anti-Semite. I thought we kind of had an understanding.
All right, let's not get off the thing. So it was an Asian white supremacist. It's even more disconcerting. But Hitler wasn't probably a fan of the Asians. So he's not an Aryan. So
He liked the Japanese.
So this is like So anyway, I didn't know that Daryl had this sympathy for these people. So when the Tucker thing first happened, this accusation about the Zionists, and he used the phrase about he says prisoners ended up dead. But then if you look at the letter that he then quotes where they're complaining they don't have the food to feed all these quote unquote prisoners, so it might be Daryl used the word prisoner. It might be more humane just to find a fast-acting method of killing them all. That was a letter about the Jews. And then later in the letter, it talked about it and said, and if that doesn't work, maybe we could just sterilize them. We'll be rid of them in one generation. So this is what he was referring to, like, holy shit. And this all comes from, David Irving, who was a classic Holocaust denier. But I didn't even really know all the David Irving stuff. So then we had that blow up. I had Daryl on my podcast. He answered my questions about this, and I really was pretty hard on him. I can post the section. I was pretty hard on him, and he answered my questions pretty forthrightly and in a disarming way. Although I wasn't satisfied with the answers, I didn't feel like I even actually, to be honest, he let slip on my podcast that these arguments had come from David Irving. And there were defenders of him at the time who was like, well, we can't jump to the conclusion he got it from that. I remember that. And I didn't clip it and put it out there at the time because I didn't want to, I don't know, I was gun shy. It's like, I'm just going to, if someone picks up on it, that's fine. But I wasn't going to do that. So that was that. And then he went on Tucker. Then he went on Joe Rogan recently. And then I began to really get angry because on the Rogan episode, Rogan went on and on about how this is crazy. You're the most thorough and well-meaning historian, and people just set these things up as something you're not allowed to talk about, and there's a concerted effort to ruin you and make sure that you never work again. And there was nothing, I heard that Tucker interview, and I can't believe it was controversial. And Daryl actually said, well, I can't absolve myself totally. And Rogan's like, no, this is what. And what they never mentioned in this Rogan interview was that, no, he didn't get in trouble for trying to understand the psychology of the Germans in post-World War I, Treaty of Versailles, Germany, the victim maybe of, very sophisticated propaganda and, you know, to describe all the cultural currents such that someone might say, well, you know what? There for the grace of God goes I. Maybe if I was a German in Germany at that time, I might have looked the other way also. That kind of inquiry does not offend me. It offends some people. It does not offend me at all. And it's related in some way to Hannah Arendt, you know, the banality of evil. Like this is important stuff to talk about. Oh, unless you want to say, no, the Germans are born evil. I remember saying to my grandmother, but you don't say all Germans. She goes, no, they're evil. I'm like, no, Grandma.
Well, we've had the same discussion about the Old South. If, you know, like
Yes.
everybody in the Old South thought slavery was okay. If you had been in the Old South, would you have been the one dude
Yeah, right.
that didn't think that way?
Right. Now, I don't want to let the Germans off the hook as much as I left the Old South off the hook, because these were their neighbors, and this was the Germany of Schiller and Ode to Joy and Kellogg-Briand Treaty and Never Have War Again, and you know they consider themselves at the height of modern civilization and ethics, right? So it's quite a lot when your neighbors just start getting rounded up into ghettos and then disappearing. But nevertheless, it happened to people with the same 46, you know, chromosomes that we all have, and so that's not what offended me. What offended me was they totally whitewashed the Tucker interview. He did not get in trouble for that. He got in trouble for saying that Churchill was installed by Zionist financiers that he owed money to, and that World War II, the worst catastrophe in the history of planet Earth, was simply a product of pursuing Jewish interests. And he got this from David Irving. And then if you go, and he admitted he got it from David Irving. And then if you go back to the David Irving longer, unabridged version of that argument, he says Churchill actually never concerned himself with the Nazis until then. Until Churchill started getting money from these Jews, he didn't care about Nazi Germany. And I put this on my Twitter feed. And actually, once the Jews bought him, they had only one thing they bought. He had to turn his guns towards Germany. This is, and he admits this is where he got it from. And then he also admitted on his blog that he had discussed this with Tucker the night before. So Tucker heard this argument either for the first time or already knew it. I don't know. And then you can hear Tucker asking once, twice, three times the question, what was Churchill doing? Why did he do it? What motivated him? And then Daryl's like, shh. And Tucker says, that's the wryest smile I've ever seen. And then Daryl goes forth with this argument, all of which is to say that Tucker, this fucking creep, he wanted Daryl to make the argument that the war is behind, that the Jews were behind World War II. And by the way, as we know, people of his ilk think, and the Jews are behind the Iraq War. And if you fast forward to more recently, the Jews are behind our support for Ukraine. So this is getting serious. So
what do you make of Daryl's tweet saying, walking back that argument?
I have to reread it. He did. But I did hold my fire on Daryl. So whatever he said, just like what he says about Arthur Quan Lee, like he has a good way of diffusing it. Question is whether it's real or just damage control. And I got to my limit here where I began to think, you know what,
But does it even matter what he really thinks? It's what he's putting out there. And
No, it does matter. It matters. It doesn't change everything. But of course it matters.
But the harm is what he's putting out there, I think, more so than...
Well, okay. But in terms of my personal estimation of the man, it matters to me whether... So then I began to look into the stuff he said on Rogan. And he says that when Hitler heard about Kristallnacht, he called up Goebbels and said, what the hell are you doing? Cut this shit out right now. I said, I never heard that before. So then I went to look into David Irving, and I found myself at the Richard Evans book called Lying About Hitler, which everybody should read. I posted an excerpt on my Twitter feed. And this actually is a total David Irving argument. But actually, it's a David Irving argument that came up in a court case where the judge found that David Irving was lying, was a Holocaust denier, was dishonest about his arguments, dishonest about his sources. You can read all about it. And I read this book called Lying About Hitler by Richard Evans. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's clear that by the overwhelming preponderance of the evidence, David Irving was guilty here of lying. And I might say, after reading that book, it might even be beyond a reasonable doubt. That is how devastating this book is to David Irving's argument. And I emailed
That
Daryl.
argument being that Hitler was against Kristallnacht.
Yeah, this is absolutely falsified. And you can read. I've been reading the transcript. So then I emailed Daryl about it. Hopefully I don't get the time wrong. And Daryl was like, "Well, yeah, I'm sort of familiar with that. I'm not really sure." And then somebody brought it up on Twitter. He's like, "Yeah, I know something about that David Irving trial, but I'm not really up on the details." And then just by coincidence, a few days earlier, Daryl had tweeted out a pile of books as his sources for the World War II. And there in the pile is Lying About Hitler by Richard Evans. I'm like, what the fuck? There is no way anybody read one chapter, 20 pages of that book, and they forgot, because it's the first thing covered in the book. There's no way that somebody read that book and forgot the mound of evidence against this argument, the fact that there was a judicial verdict about it. There's just no way. And I lost my cool. I'm like, fuck it. This is no longer plausible to me. This guy knows 100% these arguments. He knows 100% what the judge said in the David Irving Lipstadt trial. He knows exactly what's in the Richard Evans book. And the arguments are the same. What about Arthur Quan Lee? Yeah, I didn't really know. What about the David? I didn't really know. I'm fuzzy on this is, and I went deep on it, and I started exposing that and other things from his presentation, like the fact that after Hitler was exposed to this book, Germany Must Perish by Theodor Kaufmann, which was a self-published book which advocated that we, before World War II, advocated that we eradicate the German race and castrate them, whatever it is, that somehow this was the reason that Hitler made the Jews wear yellow armbands. This is all disproven.
He said that on Rogan?
He said that in his podcast. Okay. I started picking around, and I'm like, you know what? I'm a nice person, and I'm a person who can tolerate people I disagree with, but I can't ever. I'm not gonna. It's insidious, because you back yourself up, and you find yourself like Bridge Over the River Kwai. If anybody's seen that movie, where all of a sudden you're covering for the enemy. All of a sudden you've forgotten why you got into this to begin with. I got into this to fight for, sounds corny, for truth. I want to defend my people. I want to defend them based on truth. I want to call them out when they're not true. And, I have vouched for this guy. And now my internal switch, it went from, like a toggle switch. It was on the left, then it went to the middle, like this, a toggle switch has a middle position. And it just imperceptibly, it switched to on. I'm like, no, I can't anymore. I don't believe it anymore. And so I started to ask him for his sources, because I did some research about the ethics of historians. And absolutely, I posted this on my Twitter feed as well. Every historian is supposed to leave a trail of their research, so anyone can then go back and check it. And as I said, in every bar argument, when you have among idiots, you say something, say, "What are you talking about?" I say, well, "Google it." Right? I mean, how many times do we ask people to show their sources? Just knuckleheads, right? Proving to each other, "No, I didn't make this up. This is real." Now, this guy is doing dozens of hours of history podcasts, and I can't ask him, "Hey, where'd you get that? Can you back this up?" It's the most basic thing in the world. I didn't attack him personally. I'm like, what about this? What about this? Did you get this from David Irving? And then what happens is, immediately, his followers, I posted a video of this, descended on me. You saw the video, right, Dan?
Yes.
It was just, Jew, what's it like to be a Jew? what is it like to have to make a law to be a people that's so odious that they have to make a law against hating you? I mean, just Jew, one after the most. A Nazi orgy descended on me on this guy's feed.
Of what you posted? How much more is there that you didn't post?
You can go to the thing yourself, but I posted a very high percentage of them, but almost every one referred to my Judaism. I don't think there was a single comment on his feed saying, criticizing my request for the sources, backing up his sources. Normally, when you do something like that, people start researching and say, "No, here it is. Daryl, found it here." Nobody was gainsaying my accusation that these don't come from any place but Holocaust deniers' sites. It was just a fucking low-class Nazi bigoted attack, and Daryl didn't correct a single person, not one fucking thing. Now, I noticed on my feed, I didn't actually hear anybody attacking the Goyim, nobody attacking the Gentiles, nobody saying I not that these things never happen, but I didn't see anybody saying anything racist on my feed. Periel, you're screwing up the mic. I didn't detect anybody being racist on my feed, and you guys know me well enough. If somebody, I say, don't do that, or I would reprimand them. I would block. I'm not going to have my feed turn into a string of 30 different racist comments about somebody who argued with me about something. That's all I did. I argued with him about something. I didn't call him names. I didn't attack him. I argued with him about something. Oh, is this David?
Yes.
Hey, come on in. You're hearing the tail.
So David's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, come sit down. So it's okay. So that's where we're at now. And, I invite everybody to go at the thing. Now, even through this, I'll say the last defense of Daryl, you'll see he's not comfortable being a nasty person. He's soft in his wording towards me. Hasn't blocked me.
He blocked me, by the way.
Yeah, he made some arguments that I think were, not convincing, because I think the essence of truth is that he is taking these arguments unskeptically from Holocaust deniers, from people like David Irving and this guy, I can't remember, this is another Holocaust denying tweeter who wrote these two essays about how the Morgenthau Plan during the Second World War was a result and cribbed from Theodor Kaufmann's book, Germany Must Perish. This seems to be the basis of the argument that the book was passed around the Roosevelt administration. So I think that, listen, I hope I haven't hung an innocent man. I mean, it's been out there 4 or 5 days already. You'd think that he would have come forward. What are you talking about, Noam? I didn't take this from David Irving. Here it is by this credible person. So, and I will, if I'm wrong, I will absolutely apologize if I'm wrong. And by the way, I also consulted even with some experts, people I know. Well, I wrote some historians, and I consulted with some not professional historians, but people I know who really follow this stuff closely.
Well, I don't think you need to be a professional historian to know that if somebody says something, it's not inappropriate to say, okay, where are you getting that from?
Right. No, but I'm saying I didn't go public with the accusation that this was coming from the worst of sketchy sources. I didn't want to have egg on my face, and I didn't want to slander somebody or libel somebody. Just because, I don't make an accusation and then find out it was wrong and say, oh, sorry, oops, like so many journalists do. And then the retraction is never seen, and he can't wipe that off. I didn't do it lightly. I did not do it lightly. I did it with absolute integrity and responsibility. And if it turns out to be wrong, it turns out to be wrong. And I will apologize to Daryl Cooper. It might. I
mean, I don't know. You're constantly giving all of these people who are dancing around in this anti-Semitism.
But let's separate
all of
the issues.
These out.
Let's separate the issues. But even if it does turn out to be wrong on the facts, what I will not turn out to be wrong about is that he sat by when people attacked me in an anti-Semitic orgy, simply for asking him, what are your sources? Mm-hmm. That can't be undone. He did that.
100%.
And when you do that, in some way, you show what you're about. Now, audience capture, this is a real thing. And the last thing I'm going to say before we introduce David, it just reminds me of, we talked about on this podcast, when Norman Finkelstein, like 10 months ago, he didn't want to appear on a dais with this guy Jackson Hinkle. Do you remember this? And because Jackson Hinkle was just too far for Norman Finkelstein. It reminded me to say one more thing about Daryl. Immediately on Finkelstein's Twitter feed, his father's like, "A Jew is a Jew. We knew you were a Jew all along. What do you expect from a Jew? How did we ever not know you were Jewish at heart all along?" So like can you imagine if Daryl, were to, this is what Daryl and Dave Smith and all of them know. This is what they risk. That's why I tweeted out this last scene in the last part of Mickey Mouse Sorcerer's Apprentice, where Mickey, creates the brooms. And then the brooms become, he can't fight the spell. The spell gets turned on him. So these people, like they've created these armies, their broomsticks, and now they can't control them.
That's what everybody was saying to Norman Finkelstein, that you're a Jew is a Jew.
Yeah.
Well, that's like that famous joke, right?
I don't know.
That anti-Zionist Jew and a Zionist Jew walk into a bar and the bartender says, "We don't serve Jews."
Exactly.
It's not a very funny joke, but it makes a point.
Well, a lot of Jews think they can opt out of being Jewish. Suddenly they think they can opt out of being Jewish. They can opt out of anti-Semitism. They can opt out of anti-Zionism. But as I always like to say, when it comes down to it, the Hamas folks don't think you can opt out of it. They're just gonna look.
Put your headphones on and talk closer to the mic and let's introduce you. But I don't want to finish your thought.
No, I mean, I wrote a piece for the Jerusalem Post about this. I compared it because I'm also half African American, so I compared it to like house slaves and field slaves in antebellum South. Like during the pre-Civil War era, during the era of slavery, there was this idea that which had some credence, but that house slaves, because they toiled in the home, they often were lighter skinned because of miscegenation and rape, that they had an easier time than field slaves who were out in the fields, toiling and picking crops. And I wrote this piece for the Jerusalem Post. It was in response to one of these insane, pro-Hamas Jews who spoke at the Venice Film Festival and used her. I think Sarah Freeland was her name, and she used her award speech to basically, take down Israel. And I was like, these are like, the house slaves of the Jewish community. But at the end of the day, during slavery, whether you were a house slave or a field slave, you were still a slave. And these Jews don't seem to understand whether they're a house Jew or a field Jew or court Jew or whatever. Like they're still Jews, and when Hamas comes and, is about to kill you, they're going to say, we thank you for your service, but they're still going to kill you. If during the Holocaust, there weren't gas chamber exceptions for like the Jews that the Nazis liked. They
allegedly gas chamber.
Yeah, exactly. There was no you couldn't buy your way out of extermination because you were like, the right kind of Jew. Like the folks who don't like us don't see any difference between any of us. We are all the same to them.
Yeah. You introduce
that was David Kaufman. He joins us, editor and columnist at the New York Post and a regular writer for The Telegraph, The Spectator, Airmail, and The Forward, and an adjunct fellow at the Tel Aviv Institute.
That's me.
Welcome, David.